Alrighty. All right. Let's get this stream up and running here. I'm going to kill some time while waiting for Mr. Liberal Steve to show up and tell us about his wine date with Curtis Yarvin. All right. Give you guys some time to pile into the comments here. You guys are popping already. Is the background buzz fixed? I had to tweak something with my mic right after I went live. Hopefully it has been resolved. If not, I have a feeling I know what it is. Steven tagged me or Steven tweeted something about how he expected that he was making a bet on what the title would be this week, and that it would be something having to do with fuck capitalism. And so I had to accommodate, of course. I just heard myself talking. I have gone down a rabbit hole, as I'm wont to do, on another guy's videos. Someone thumbs down already. Like, share, and subscribe, folks. I've been going crazy on this guy's videos. His name is Jay Dyer. He's a really, really interesting thinker. I got into him because I was looking up like Orthodox, like the videos on Orthodox Christianity and Orthodox theology. And he's got a whole bunch of stuff. But then he's done a whole bunch of debates. Like, he debated Adam Kokesh, and he debated Stefan Molyneux, and then a bunch of other people as well. So he's got some really, really interesting stuff, deep philosophical stuff that is a lot of it is just over my head. But I don't really see myself as someone with original ideas. I'm just kind of like, I synthesize everyone else's ideas. So I constantly need to like expose myself to new people's thoughts and populate my brain with their stuff, so that then I can turn around and tell everybody else about it. One of his interesting things is his proof for the existence of God is he uses what's called the transcendental argument for the existence of God. And it's interesting. I'm still getting my mind wrapped around it. I went through a stretch growing up Protestant. I went through a stretch when I was younger of watching or listening to everything I could find related to William Lane Craig or Greg Bonson or all these different Protestant apologists who did lots of different debates about arguments for the existence of God. And to the point where at one point I wanted to be an apologist. Like, when I was early teens, that's what I wanted for my career. I wanted to be an apologist. But then I haven't really paid any attention to that whole school of thought for a long time, for, I don't know, 20 years, something like that. And so then I started watching Jay Dyer's videos and getting back into listening to some of those debates. And it's kind of like I had a car that I used to go like take for joyrides and goof off with. And then I parked it in the garage one day and just left it there, put a tarp over it, haven't done anything with it. And now I'm busting it back out, and I've got to try to get all the dust off of it and take it for a spin, run some fluids through it, change all the filters and everything. So I'm kind of trying to boot everything back up again. And so it's been really interesting listening to the case that he makes. And so far, I think I've listened to probably like 5 different debates that he's done, all on a couple of them. Like, he did the one with Kokesh was basically state versus anti-state. And obviously Kokesh took the anti-state position. And it was interesting. Like, I was listening to Kokesh, and 2 years ago, maybe I would have been sitting there like just nodding along, like, yeah, man, you tell him. No, he's kind of making sort of a generic. Now I recognize it as kind of this generic, sort of wishy-washy appeal to relativistic kind of individualism. That there's some stuff there. It's like, okay, yeah, well, you're describing, like, obviously the world that you want to live in is a world that I would want to live in as well, but not if it was achieved the way that you're trying to achieve it. It was I just found myself being like, all right, just trying to get Kokesh to just shut up so we could get back to Jay talking, and uh, it kind of descended into an argument about the existence of God, essentially, which is kind of how all these conversations go, and Kokesh just went to like complete like Reddit shit tier stuff, like, do you believe that Santa Claus exists? Do you believe the Easter Bunny exists? Do you believe that God exists? It was kind of like, it was funny that you could see that Kokesh thought that he was he was going to run circles around him. He thought that he was the boss in this arena, and he's bringing like these really, really basic bitch arguments. And Dyer, from having watched some of his other videos, he's just an absolute titanic intellect who's read like every philosophical piece of writing ever written, as far as I can tell. And so it was just very interesting. It was clearly two people operating on completely different levels of intellect and insight. So the transcendental argument for God's existence is one that I'm still wrapping my mind around. It's a meta level argument, and it's I guess kind of the gist of, you're taking argumentation out of the material sphere and you're taking it into the metaphysical realm, and essentially the premise is that at the base of every single person's worldview lies some form of circularity, and the circularity is inevitable, is the kind of axiomatic position that he's taking and demonstrating, I think, pretty well. And so the matter of people hit that point and they just kind of want to pull back from it, and they say, well, no, you're getting into like arguments from silence or something like that. But what he's demonstrating is that for every system of thought that you have, you can't just treat it as in essence, every single system of thought that you have is going to have to depend upon, it's going to have to assume its own premises, and it's in essence going to assume a metaphysical reality that from whence you draw these axioms. And the atheistic position wants to use that metaphysical reality, or that metaphysical realm. It wants to be able to axiomatically make certain statements or certain assumptions, but then turn around and say that they don't exist. And so he takes every one of these conversations into that level. And I mean, like, Stefan Molyneux is a sharp guy. He's a very sharp, well-versed in philosophy, very quick-witted. And you could tell very quickly in their conversation, it stayed mostly cordial, but you could tell very quickly in their conversation that he was kind of backed in a corner. He was out of ammo. He didn't have much to say. So he completely changed his argumentation. And I guess he basically said kind of, I'm open to your argument, but I'm not going to go back and forth with it. I'll just let you present your argument and then I'll read up on it later on. And so just present your argument for the sake of my audience. And so Jay did. And it was very good. So I wanted to see if I could find something here while we're waiting for Steven to show up. I wanted to see if I could find a really simple, just because this is what I've been thinking about right now. I wanted to find a really simple breakdown of the transcendental argument, or a transcendental argument, because there's many of them. But I don't know if I can just find one really quickly here. What I would do is just go to, if you're interested in this kind of thing, and you're interested in listening to, I know a lot of people would find these kinds of conversations just like, it would make their eyes cross as they listen to this. like nitty gritty, detailed, philosophical kind of semantic parsing of words. What's the definition of is? Those kinds of conversations. I find them fascinating. So if you would enjoy them as well, then just go look up his website is jaysanalysis.com. And he does his big thing that he his claim to fame, I guess, is he's done a lot of really high level work on systems theory, and then specifically he's attributed it to history and anthropology and esotericism within Hollywood. And he's done some videos, some deep dive like documentary series and some stuff like that. So that's where that's kind of his thing. So he's got a whole bunch of content that you can go check out. His name is Jay Dyer. Dyer spelled Dyer, and he's an Orthodox Christian who's a former. He was I think grew up Reformed or something like that, and then spent about 10 years as a Catholic before finally converting to Orthodoxy. And so he debates Catholics, he debates Protestants, he'll debate just about anybody, and so far I haven't seen him not be completely in control of any conversation that he's been in. But anyways, so pull up Twitter here and see if there was any replies to one of the tweets I sent out here. Another thing for you to listen to. I'll just keep inundating you guys with stuff to listen to, but you've heard me talk about it on here before. The Lord of Spirits podcast. It is absolutely phenomenal. Now it's going to be probably equally heady as Jay Dyer stuff, but it'll be a little less combative, maybe. Jay tends to be, he's a nice guy, but he's also very he's got a distinct case of the tism in some cases, and he's a total bulldog as a debater. So he can definitely come off as really arrogant, and some of that is a performance kind of, where he's like playing a character kind of, but he could just run circles around most people, and it's kind of like when you get someone like that who could just run circles around anybody intellectually, it's kind of hard for them not to be a little hard to relate to. So Jay's stuff can be a little awkward sometimes listening to some stuff. Just because people don't exactly know how to relate to him, but Lord of Spirits is phenomenal. It's two Orthodox priests, and if you are especially if you're a Protestant, if you're a Catholic, this may still be the case as well, but especially if you're a Protestant and you don't have, I'll just say it this way: this would be a good measurement for what the level to which your mind will be blown by the Lord of Spirits podcast. If you have a completely sound understanding of what the Nephilim is in either the Book of Enoch or in Genesis 6, then you'll probably just find the Lord of Spirits podcast interesting. If that's something that you've never really done a deep dive on, or you've never really looked at, that's just like the tip of the iceberg of a vast trove of really, really interesting history and symbolism contained within Christianity, within the Bible. So that's kind of the basis for the idea of the Lord of Spirits podcast. And it's they get into metaphysics, ontology, epistemology. There's apologetics. They get into archaeology. They touch on a whole bunch of different stuff, and they're coming from the perspective of the Orthodox theological position, and they're exegeting from the Bible and describing the historical doctrinal posture of the early Christians. One of the fathers just wrote a book called Religion of the Apostles, where he's basically, I bought the book, I haven't read it yet, but he's basically describing what would have been the spiritual or like essentially he wrote it to be kind of like a doctrinal breakdown for Eastern Orthodoxy, but he particularly is coming from the perspective of what would it have been if you were someone who lived in like the Second Temple, the Second Temple period, or around the time that of Christ? If you were just a ordinary Jewish person living then, what would your uh, worldview have looked like? What would your view of the spirit realm have been? And that's kind of the premise of the podcast and of the book that he wrote. Michael Heiser is another really interesting one. Michael Heiser has the book The Unseen Realm that I'm most of the way through, and he's also got a really interesting podcast where he goes into all kinds of esoterica and conspiracies and UFOs and all sorts of different stuff. And he talks about like a lot about like Job, like the story of Job, and what was happening in the council in heaven, God's council, and what that actually means. How much of it is metaphorical? How much of it is analogy? How much of it is real? There's a lot more of it that's real actually than most people have been aware. But so those are two really interesting things that you guys can check out if when you're not busy listening to these episodes over and over and over again. That if you can finally tear yourself away to go listen to something else, then I would recommend Jay Dyer and the Lord of Spirits podcast. So this is cool. Here, let me see if I can get this on. Let me share this. And we're going to go for Chrome tab and notifications. And what's up, Cable? Cable's listening. So you get a little inception here. There's me and then more me all over the screen. It's interesting doing this show later in the days because usually we're going live at usually like 1 p.m., 1 or 2 p.m. Pacific. So doing this later in the day is interesting. The reason that is partly because Stephen is on his way back from DC, where he went to meet with the one and only Yarvin Mencius Moldbug for lunch. And he had a very interesting experience. He came away from it very much pretty worked up. He was sending me some pretty funny voice messages and describing to me what the experience was like, and it was definitely interesting. And we're not going to talk about all of it on here, but I'll give him an opportunity when he shows up to share whatever he cares to share about the experience. And then maybe at some point here in the future we will have one Mr. Curtis Yarvin on this podcast. That would be pretty cool. But so that's one reason why we're late. We're waiting for him to show up. And then this afternoon, the last 2 weeks, my son Eastwood has been doing swim lessons. He's 9, almost 10 months old. We wanted to get him trained up here early. So we the last 2 weeks did 8 days total. Went and spent half an hour swimming around in the pool, and it's 100 degrees outside, so it feels really nice. But today was the last day, so he was his little graduation. He got a little certificate for it, and the pool that we went to has a big water slide, and so we stayed a little extra after the class today, so that we could kind of swim around and just do some free swim and practice his little exercises and stuff with him, and also so that we could do the water slide. So we did the water slide today, and typically Eastwood he does not care about like getting his head underwater, getting water in his mouth, up his nose. He'll gasp and kind of splutter and everything, but he almost never cries from it. Today we did the water slide. I went first, and everyone who'd gone on it that I'd heard from before had talked about, it's not that fast. It's pretty slow. And so I underestimated it, and it wasn't that fast, but it was faster than I expected it to be. And my son is an absolute solid chunk of a baby. He's over 26 pounds now, and he's like at least 99th percentile. So as I'm going down the slide, we hit there's a couple spots where it gets steeper and it kind of swerves around a corner, and I got off balance and I got rocked back onto my back instead of sitting upright with him. And so when we hit the bottom, he and I both just went plowing straight down into the water. The teacher was there to try to scoop him up to keep him from going under too much, but there wasn't much that you could do. We both went plowing into the water. I thought it was a lot of fun, but the 9-month-old did not. He was not a fan. So So then we got him. He calmed down pretty quick. He was kind of fussing and crying because he got water in his face, but then he calmed down. So then his mom took him up. Amy went up with him, and she did the same thing, and she had almost the exact same thing happen. And she came down, and her glasses went one way, and everything was all over the place. So we kind of got him gathered together, and he was not thrilled. He is not a fan of water slides at this point. So he's fine. It'll be next year. It'll be interesting. We'll go back there and see. This is me as a father. I'm like, okay, you didn't like it. I didn't expect you to like it. But it's fine. You can do things that you don't like. There's nothing wrong with doing things that you don't like, that are unpleasant and that it might make you unhappy in the moment. But next year we go back there. You're going to go down the water slide. We'll go down the water slide together. If you're afraid of it, we're going to conquer the fear, and you're going to learn to love the water slide because I think he will. I think it's the type of thing that he would really enjoy. But anyway, so that was our afternoon. We were tormenting the little guy, and he calmed down pretty quick after it. He was crying and fussing for a little while, but then he calmed down, and we had a good time hanging out there. So let me see here. Steven should be here. Steven, throw in the comment. If you're still in the comments, throw in the comments how far out you are, because I'm gonna get in a little bit to this conversation about the title, the reference to capitalism, and I think I'll end up probably digging into this a little more in the future, because this is something that it's something that I haven't completely solved for myself yet. I'm just kind of starting to put these thoughts together. But this is like, if you guys have followed for any length of time, I'm going to be clear that when I bring an idea to you guys, when I start talking about stuff, I don't bring all this stuff up claiming that I have all the answers or claiming that I've solved something or even necessarily trying to convince people of something. I'm going to bring I'm going to put the information out there. I'm going to present the idea to you, and you could do with it as you please. If you decide that it's not for you and you don't want to bring it on board, then don't. And it doesn't make any difference to me. What I'm interested in is challenging dogmas. And I don't think there shouldn't be dogmas. I just think the dogmas should be challenged, and then slaying sacred cows. I want to see how I keep going through this experience where I have accepted something as a dogma. I've even further than that, I'll feel completely argued into a position where I feel 100% confident. Like I have accessed the truth. And then a little more time will go by. I'll hear someone else talking about something, and they'll make an absolutely unassailable case against the thing that I'd been fully persuaded was true. So then I have a choice. What do I do here? Do I just reject it and just go on with my day and just pretend I didn't hear about it? Or, do I just tear that part of my my cognitive picture? Did I just tear that part up and rebuild it? And so that's kind of where I found myself, is that I'm in the business of perpetually rebuilding my cognitive perspective on a lot of things. So capitalism is a very loaded word. And I like this thing that Jason Stapleton has said before, where he said that capitalism is the best system? I don't know. It's just the best one that we found so far. And I'm sympathetic to that position. But as I've gone down this rabbit hole of questioning the philosophical tradition of libertarianism and the associated dogmas that come with that, and as I've realized that libertarianism is really just libertarians oppose other modern schools of thought because they aren't liberal enough. That's fundamentally what it is. Libertarianism is trying to purify liberalism. It's trying to distill liberalism to its essence. That's what libertarian theory, as it's been posited to this point, that's essentially what it is. It's taking the liberal conception of the world, the conception of the self, and it's building around that conception of the self and attacking the flawed the attacking the flaws in previous schools of thought that have built on liberal conceptions. So when libertarians see themselves as being right, or as being the ones who access the truth, or they've got the best ideas, what they're saying, whether they realize it or not, I'm not saying that they're like, I'm not saying they're deliberately lying or deliberately obscuring the truth. I'm saying that this is what they're expressing is the latent liberal in them. We're all liberals now. We've growing up. If you were born and raised in a Western country in the last 100 years, you're a liberal. So your psychology is like inescapably liberal. You're naturally enculturated into liberalism, and that's going to be your instinct. Until you actually directly confront these things and start undoing some of that wiring. So libertarianism is attempting to distill liberalism to its essence, and it's critiquing conservatism, communism, whatever other strain of liberalism for being insufficiently liberal. But what happens if you say you zoom even further back to just the whole school of liberalism, and you begin questioning the presuppositions for that entire school in and of itself, then you have to start you have to start challenging the presuppositions that were built on those presuppositions that you're or the positions that were built on the presuppositions of that system itself. And that's where I found myself. I realized that when I dug down to the base level of liberalism, I hadn't gotten to the base level, that liberalism was just a construct on top of another base level. And it was a learned school of thought that has only existed for a few hundred years and is still in the process of being fleshed out. But we're also watching it, as we've been able to watch it over the last few hundred years, we're able to evaluate and determine distinct characteristics of its nature. And we've got I think a large enough sample size at this point that we can determine the extent to which those characteristics either do or don't completely comport with the human creature. So capitalism has really, even for its advocates and for its opponents, has become a buzzword. As I see, it's like Vincent in the comments says, capitalism is a worthless concept. People use it to mean markets plus bad stuff. And even people who advocate for it will use capitalism synonymously with free markets. And when I tweeted something, I can't remember. I didn't pull the tweet up, and maybe I'll try scrolling it here and see if I can get to it. The tweet I had. Okay, here it is. I said capitalism and communism are two means to the same end. And what I mean by this is that capitalism and communism are two expressions of liberalism. I haven't thought about this deep enough to determine if they're the opposite poles or opposite wings of liberalism, but I'll just say they're two subsets of liberalism. They're two expressions of liberalism. But both of them, so if we look at the history of the schools of thought, both of them have been in their current form, have been more or less conceived of just within the last 100 and 200 years, maybe, essentially. You can get traces of them that were existed prior to that have been, those threads have been kind of tied into stuff more recently. But as we think of it today, the idea of the capitalist class is a relatively new conception, speaking on the order of millennia of human existence. So the notion of the free market is really where I've started getting squeamish about this subject, that free markets just being an absolute good. And I don't see how you can rationally get to that point unless you believe that human beings are fundamentally good and fundamentally tend toward making good decisions. And even if that was the case, just because human beings fundamentally tend toward making good decisions doesn't mean that markets will tend to fundamentally move toward good decisions. Because markets aren't just dictated by to look at the nature of the market. You don't just evaluate every single participant in the market and weight them equally. As different people and integrate themselves into the market, they're going to do so at different levels of impact. Your average assembly line pleb isn't going, like, if you're thinking of the market as kind of like this accumulation of all the transactional commercial behavior of everyone in a given region, whether that's a localized or much more. If you think of it in that sense, then you're clearly going to have some people that impact it a lot and some people that impact it very little. But if you understand the Pareto principle, if you understand the fact that every single human civilization will naturally follow its elites because of the nature of mimetic desire, because of the natural distribution of talents and abilities and resources, the fact that they're naturally going to accumulate to a few of the people means that a few of the people are naturally going to have a disproportionate impact on the market. So a market, when you say a free market, my first thought is, okay, free from what? Or free from whom? And clearly it means the implication is free from meddling from a state. It's free from forced activity. It's free from coercion. But imagining, I'm just going to kind of run with a hypothetical here. So you've got 100 people in a town. And if resources are distributed just completely evenly among all of them, the market is going to reflect the commercial decisions of all 100 people and their values, the values that they express, the desires that they have, their needs, their demands. Over time, so if say you start with this initial state where resources are all divvied exactly equitably among all 100 people, eventually, naturally, over a course of time, if the market is free, so it's free from some sort of an external force regulating behavior within that market, naturally, say 5 of those 100 people are going to ultimately control 95% of the assets within that market. So now how free is that? It's free from outside coercion, but are you going to say that every single person within that market is still capable of acting in exactly the same way as they were when resources were not distributed in such a way? There's definitely going to be there's going to be a change to the character or the nature of that market. It's going to have a different behavior now. There we go. There he is.
How's it going?
So you're gonna have that select few people, that's say 5 people out of that 100, who are now going to wield like disproportionate control over that market. And they could abide entirely by libertarian principles. They could abide entirely by libertarian, the libertarian ethic, and just naturally through the force of their influence, they're going to they're going to modify the decisions that other people make. They're going to affect the demand for other people. And the libertarian ethic uh, has no way of dealing with something like um, uh, the something like propaganda, something like I want to say like brainwashing, but like the nature, like not just propaganda, not because propaganda is kind of subjective. It's like where does propaganda, where does the truth end, and where's the propaganda begin? But the the libertarian ethic has no means of dealing with a group of people who control the messaging within the market, who control if you understand the way that people are impacted by their environment, the way people absorb the ideas or the ethos of their market, the way that people respond to advertising. Advertising can be incredibly manipulative and deceptive without being objectively wrong or unethical or in breach of some sort of contract or anything like that. And this is all within the construct of the free market. The free market, it's free. There aren't people, there isn't a state there that's actively distorting the market. So just from like a philosophical, like an abstract perspective, just saying the free market is a just an a priori good thing because it's free leaves out all kinds of it's really just kind of an arbitrary value distinction. It's or description. It's not. It's free in one sense. It's free from state coercion, but it's not. The idea there is supposed to be then that every single person participating is participating voluntarily, but then is voluntariness a sufficient metric? People can voluntarily participate in something that's really bad for them, and they may not be aware that it's bad for them because, like in this case, people may not be aware of how bad seed oils are for you. So they'll voluntarily participate in acquiring seed oils and consuming them. And there isn't a libertarian way of dealing with that. And libertarians will typically respond, they'll just be like, "Oh, you outcompete them," or what? They're just essentially they're like, "Well, fuck everyone else. I got mine," and that may be fine for you, but it's not fine for me. So, and this is just part of the conversation about capitalism. This is just part of what I am kind of driving at here, because ultimately, if you understand the history of where capitalism came from, that it didn't just arise from the ether, but it's actually a reaction to something else. You'll understand the motivation for the system. That the system wasn't conceived of by bleeding hearts who just cared about equality and ensuring the voluntary interaction of everyone in society. Capitalism as a system, just the same as communism, is a product of the aristocracy. And it's ultimately a product of the mercantile class, because the mercantile class are the ones who had the most in common with the people who were conceiving of these different systems in the nature of liberalism. And the whole thing was all a reaction to autarkic sovereign monarchies that didn't want just free and open trade, because they understood the degree to which free trade between different nations can compromise the inherent values of one or both nations. Free trade isn't just inherently good all by itself. Just because the people are both voluntarily participating in it doesn't mean that there aren't negative externalities. And the reason that you initially had things like licensure and tariffs was in large part because the nature of the societies then, you didn't have this understanding of each person as just an autonomous unit that stood for himself. Everyone was a representative of a family or a court or some organization. There weren't autonomous humans. They were representatives of an organization. So a king would place his support behind a tariff or some kind of a licensure or something like that as a means of protection for his people against the people who didn't stand for any other unit except for themselves, the merchant class. The merchant class was incentivized to break down borders between municipalities, between sovereign entities, because they needed more customers. They had a financial incentive for free trade. And if you see, once you understand the way that liberalism boils people down, it breaks down the ties that bind a society together and boils people down to single autonomous units. And when you realize that single autonomous unit is now a new customer, once you start understanding the incentives behind this, you'll recognize that just like libertarianism being a theoretical description of everything that's good without a concordant praxis that will get you to that point, capitalism is much the same. That's the direction that I'm heading. That I don't oppose voluntary interactions between people. I don't support a state, a democratic state, arbitrarily using various means of taxation as a way of, enriching itself. But just saying, oh, just free the market and everything will be fine. Just cut it loose and everything will be all hunky dory. Completely misunderstands the nature of a human being. It completely misunderstands how you get good things in a society. You don't get it through capitalism. Capitalism does not yield good results, taken as it is currently conceived. Anyway, so this will be the beginning of this conversation. I won't. I don't have all the. I don't have all the thought completely. Like I couldn't just rigorously argue and defend this position right now, and I'm not interested in. I don't need to. I don't have anything to prove to anyone. But I can kind of intuit the direction that this is going, and this will be something that will come up again at some point.
Are you saying that people who buy into libertarianism are kind of actually advocating an old political formula that in the future might be used to bring upon something that they actually would vehemently oppose in the way of like a sort of stakeholder capitalism model?
Huh. Yeah. Imagine that, huh?
Yeah. Oof.
Can't believe it.
Yeah.
All right. So
tell us. Thanks for watching King Pilled today, everybody.
Thanks for turning out, folks. We appreciate your support. We'll see you next time.
Yep. All right. Have a good one.
Before you go.
Yep. Sure.
We need to pay some bills.
Mm-hmm.
So, Popular Liberty wants me to read my comments so I can clip it and turn Liberty Twitter on its head again. Okay, hold on. Let me find the comments here.
Sorry, I'm a little out of sorts. I've been driving all day. I had to meet a buddy of mine for lunch.
Okay, real quick. Let me read this here, and then okay, yeah, the Popular Liberty as usual is right on here. So I'm just going to read through his comments.
Let's go.
He said, capitalism predates the Enlightenment. In archotropism, I consider it outside of both liberal and illiberal systems. It's merely a resource optimization engine. It optimizes the supply of resources for the people's demands. This includes their demand for statecraft. The state is part of the free market. This is the point that I've been trying to make for years now. The state is part of the market. It doesn't supersede the market. It is an actor within the market. And, continuing with Popular Liberty, people demand it. People want the coercion. It profits them. Mises said anything that is profitable will be done until it is no longer marginally profitable. This rule from Mises still applies to statecraft. He says, Matt, L's want to prohibit statecraft, which will result in a black market for statecraft, which will cause a cartel of suppliers to form, which, that's what we have. Turns out descriptions of anarchy are descriptions of the status quo in a literal sense. Descriptions of anarchy are descriptions of the status quo. What we have right now is the product of anarchy applied. If you applied anarchy, we would get right back to this same point. This is the consequence of anarchy. This is what it looks like when you have anarchy. It moves this direction. He said, let me see if there's any other. He says, I would. He replied to someone else here. So Cooper Brooks says, Nick Land argues that capitalism, quote unquote, began with the invention or codification of the number 0 as a concept. That's an interesting thought. And Popular Liberty replies and says, I would argue that it began with private property after the Black Death killed off enough people to raise peasants' wages by 50%. This gave them the ability to buy their freedom from being serfs. Okay, so I think that was enough of Popular Liberty. Enough. I think that's enough of it, man. That's just enough. I think that was enough of what he was talking about. So you can clip that out. So let's pay some bills here real quick. So you guys know it. Carlos, I saw him in the chat here just a little bit ago. Carlos and Vanessa Abelar are the owners of a fantastic little company. It's called Paloma Verde. You can visit it at palomaverdecbd.com. Fantastic CBD products. Right here, I've got the nano CBD soft gels. I take one every night before I go to bed. I love it. I sleep better than I have in my entire life since I started taking it. And very vivid dreams. My back doesn't bother me as much. And I wake up feeling rested, even if I didn't sleep that much. So they've also got gummies. They've got a tincture. They've got dog treats. They've got a muscle rub. They've got basically every CBD product you can imagine. They've got a fantastic website, palomaverdecbd.com. Excuse me. Use promo code KING for 25% off any order over $75. We appreciate you supporting them. We appreciate you supporting us. So go get yourself some fantastic CBD stuff from Green Paloma, and we will love you for it. And yeah, that's it. Okay, so tell us about your new best friend.
New best friend? Oh, Kurt. Oh man.
Yeah, Kurt.
Yeah.
That guy.
I don't know.
I know he really wants to come on here, so I think we need to. I probably need to talk to him first, just to feel him out and see if he would actually really be I don't know if he'd be a good candidate. I don't really know if he'd be a good candidate for this show, because we kind of have an intellectual threshold. Yeah. We don't want people that are too far below that, but we might be able to make some exceptions here and there.
I have to say that the thing that I was most impressed with, second to the fact that basically he just holds office hours for subscribers and stuff like that. And I almost never open any emails. There's just so many, they're so long. And I opened one. I signed up for a 30-minute, conversation with them, because I was just that'll work. And I did not sleep at all, my boys. But yeah, fucking and so he emailed me and he just said, I see you're driving, I appreciate that. Are you available for lunch? I was like, okay. And the thing I was most impressed with that beyond that is for an hour and a half of, having conversation, he managed to not make me feel like a chimp, I was so thankful that, I was just I had a million things I wanted to bother him about, but I also was just maybe I'm just going to talk to him like a dude, at lunch, and just kind of do that. And I think he must've just kind of looked in, at me and just kind of all my fears of he's going to start quoting French philosophy and shit. He probably was just yeah, all right, probably not with this one, Hey, so yeah, you used to fight. So you like the punch maneuver? You like to hit the guy in the face? And yeah, me punch.
Me kick wall
by accident. Yeah. Yeah. So like he was very kind in that regard. He was also, I don't think, feeling real well. And man, I don't know. He was like meeting with people when I first walked up, to where he said to me he was meeting with like, 2 guys, and I think was kind of sick, and just to do all that shit and keep like a social calendar when you're not feeling well. Yeah, I don't know. Basically what I'm trying to say is, I've only seen him in like interviews and stuff like that, but I'm someone who, I guess like most people kind of thinks that they know people pretty well. I think that's a good dude. If I had to like come to, I get the idea that's a fucking good dude, in like, it just having like a normal ass conversation with him. Yeah, I land firmly on side of like that. That is a quality person. If I had to guess, could be wrong.
Is he any different? Like, is he exactly the same person as he is when I'll filibuster here for a minute. Is he exactly the same person through the interview, through not the interview, but the conversation, as he is when you're like listening to him on a podcast or on an interview somewhere? Is he, or does he get into character when he goes onto a show? I know that you said that he most people in the restaurant could hear your conversation. I take it.
And so one thing that I noticed was, and I wasn't sure if it was because the dude wasn't feeling well, but like the volume was not a problem, and like, I mean, we're in an Italian restaurant. We're talking about sort of like my family history. He's talking about like the mafia and stuff like that in the middle of an Italian restaurant, and just kind of just talking at a not quiet volume. In any of the topics that came up, that like, you can imagine what topics might come up if you're sitting having lunch with Curtis Yarvin. There was no volume adjustment for any of it. It was pretty fucking awesome.
He just wanted to make sure that everybody else could join in. It was such a great conversation.
I don't think he gave a fuck, and that was also very refreshing. He used some words that, you could have. It was, I don't know. It was like just pretty refreshing. He was just like saying, just what Curtis Yarvin says at full volume, wherever he was, and I really dug that. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And like, what I really did realize, what it made me think of, the people in our chat typically and stuff like that. I'm not a doctor. It may come as a surprise, but I cannot give any opinions about whether he's on the spectrum or not. So just addressing a comment that I see. But he was talking about how his audience basically self-selects. He has like he has people who like are deep into like orthodoxy. We talked about that a little bit. That would be very interesting to talk about on the show. And people, he cop, military, all over the map. And basically he was saying the common thread is that people who are his audience are able to think for themselves. And I thought that was, that tied in pretty well with the people who put up with us and kind of talk to each other in the chat and stuff like that. And it was like a legitimate moment where I was like, oh man, I think actually you might enjoy talking to our audience and like hearing the shit that they would, ask and stuff like that. So I got kind of stoked on that.
We winnow our audience regularly by making sure that we're insufferable to a certain degree, just to make sure that we only keep around those who are the hardy ones. We don't want any softies around here.
Yeah, and I think at this point, I feel a shift in the energy where it's just like, man, we don't really have to be confrontational to like libertarians and shit. Like it's like we, like maybe we have to turn the screws at a future date, but like right now, it's just like, yeah, I think we're cruising with, people know what they're in store for. People know why they're here. They know why we're here.
That's why I entitled today's episode "Fuck Capitalism," because we're kind of more on one of these.
I feel you on the fuck capitalism thing a little bit too, and I think it also is because this whole time of like individual, even for people who are fancy themselves kind of individualists, I think like, I don't know, like I'm kind of a loner, but I also understand, like it became very apparent, in like early 2020 that I'm here for the abuse. He says that's great. That it's like, oh man, you ain't gonna make it alone probably. You know, you
Yeah.
do a real
It's a tough
badass
year to
at
be
your
an individualist.
yeah. And so I think that is a big part of what is kind of resonating with people wanting to sort of like switch gears and think further through libertarianism, or whatever we're gonna say. Individualism, if you have your eyes open, is like kind of a real hard sell, real tough sell.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of see that a lot of the misery that you've been experiencing is at the hand of these corporations, which used to, and myself included, used to run to sort of defend. And just like, well, look at all the good that they're doing, and they're providing income for families. And you kind of realize quickly, it's, oh no, these motherfuckers are, yeah, they're just as bad, if not worse. It's whoever has the ability at the time to be as terrible as they think they can be or need to be.
It's it really gets to this may be one of the reasons why orthodoxy seems kind of on the ascendancy, that really the problem isn't the state or the corporation or whatever. And it sounds kind of trite or cliche, but the problem is evil. The problem is that there are evil people, and that evil people have an incentive to if the way you structure your system isn't absolutely flawless, then inevitably you will get evil people who will suss out every possible little hole or crack in the system and then just go to town on it, wringing every little bit of thing they can get out of it, taking advantage of it and distorting the system. And that's what when you create, when you for a social system, when you begin with the premise of the individual as the basis for your social system, and that the idea is anything goes except for something that hurts somebody, you've just created a scenario for every evil person in the world to go ham. You've incentivized evil people to behave in evil ways. And it doesn't matter if the majority of people are good. It doesn't matter if 99% of people are good. 1% of the people now have a clear avenue to take advantage of toward their own end. So if your system
the millionaires and the billionaires, sorry,
if your system begins with the individual, then ultimately you're going to wind up with a system that grinds the most individuals under its boot. There's a paradox here where in order to protect the individual, you need collectives. And those collectives have to have a very clearly defined, very clearly delineated purpose and methodology in order to survive, in order to make right decisions, and to provide for not just their own community but other communities around them. And that's where trade is valuable, because there's a truth to the idea that where goods don't move across, or where goods don't move across the border, armies do. There's a truth in that, but that's also not true. It's not absolutely true. Ultimately, the most natural human interactions are groups of people interacting with other groups of people. And the individualist does not want to believe that that's possible. They want to say, no, you only have individuals acting. But those individuals aren't acting as individuals. Those individuals are acting as members of the collective. Every individual acts as a member of a collective. It doesn't matter what they will find a collective to identify with. This is like the paradox of identity, that we look at identity as a thing that sets us apart from everyone else, but identity is the thing that identifies us with everyone else. Well, even if you're identity is the opposite of everyone else. So you'll have the maybe you go to school in maybe you move from the city out into like BFE, Missouri, and you're going to school with a bunch of hicks and hayseeds. You're going to get the three kids who are like, no, actually, we're goth, and they're going to dress like they're not goth because they value the goth perspective or the goth identity. They're that because they're going as far away from the other as they can. So they're still bound by the identity of everyone else. So identity is something that we adopt on like an individual level, but it's actually a collective expression. And so humans naturally interact together as groups. The Enlightenment made a great discovery, which is this reality of individuals, of the individual, and like the necessity of human rights, of treating people, not necessity of human rights, but the necessity of treating other people as if they have human rights. That's a good thing that came from the Enlightenment, but that wasn't a new idea. That was just being rediscovered and repackaged. It was an ancient, by that point, an ancient Christian idea. So, yeah, it's a rough year to be an individualist, or it's been a rough year to be an individualist. And of course, the people who are the most the people who are going to be the most dogmatic about it are going to have taken this opportunity to dig their heels in and become even more individualist. Which again isn't them expressing their individualism, it's them reacting to other people not expressing individualism. So they're still bound by the movements of the groups. But it's interesting, the idea of diversity. We're at, let me check real quick and see exactly how many subscribers we have, because I'm gonna up the ante here just a little bit. Let's see.
I would just like to take a moment to say that I am going full-blown Jason Stapleton show. I stayed in an Econo Lodge last night, and this might be a good tip for Jason if he wants more people sort of converted to this way of thinking, with the wealth, power, influence being, sort of the focus. Listen
up, Jason. Steven's got a tip for you.
Jason, big fan. Do like, you have no idea. Okay, let's have lunch.
Steven will buy the wine.
Yeah, the tip. Never. All right, I'm not. This is supporting listeners group discussion that needs to happen right now. We can't say it here. Fuck. Okay. If I may, Jason, if you want people to sort of see the light very quickly, do a challenge where you have people stay in a Econo Lodge. I think you only need to do it for one night and just let them know that is their future. Econo Lodge people, Econo Lodge surroundings, you just want them swimming in a big Econo Lodge soup. And that is the inevitable alternative to not having wealth, nor power, nor influence.
That's the wealth, power, and influence red pill.
Nothing has made me miss being rich like staying in a fucking Econo Lodge. I can't even tell you. I was trying to kill time while you check the subscribers, but that's just a quick aside.
Okay, so yeah, when we went up to Washington, we stayed in. This actually doesn't really apply to your point because we paid way too much for this place, but we were kind of looking for a place in an emergency, or not an emergency, but just last minute on the north side of Sacramento. We found a place that was $175 a night. And it looked nice. The pictures and stuff from outside looked nice, and it had good reviews. I think it was like a 4.2 rating or something. So I was like, all right, let's do it. And there was literally a homeless guy posted up in a little tarp camp in the parking lot of the hotel. Mm-hmm. I was not happy. So then if you ever want to be persuaded that being poor sucks, then go stay in a bad hotel, and you'll want to stop being poor. Just have to get that reference in there. There you go, Cable. Stop being poor.
Yeah.
So subscribers. We have 920 subscribers. So we've got 80 subscribers to go. And so now is the time where I'm going to say that diversity is a con. There was, for like almost all of recorded history, diversity was considered a weakness. It was seen as like not being united. You have unity and you have diversity. Diversity is the act of not being united. It's when you take a rope and you take all the strands apart from each other, they're all diverse. You want them united together into one to be strong. So the diversity had a negative connotation until I think it was sometime in like the 80s. And then suddenly, if you look at like the Google trends, suddenly in the 80s, it just goes whoop, shifts to suddenly being a positive connotation. Now diversity is a good thing. In practice, individualism being like the most radical form of diversity is, this should be just completely self-evident too. The idea that the individual should be self-directed. Like, how do you even think of society functions where every individual is self-directed? Clearly, that's completely chaotic and incoherent until individuals gather themselves into groups and they cede their self-directedness to that group. They self-direct themselves into the group, and then they cede themselves to the group, and the groups direct each other. That just, I like, this seems like completely self-evidently obvious once you think about it, but somehow there's this delusion that individuals being self-directed and that they will just naturally accommodate themselves to each other and just exist in peace and harmony together is quite literally utopian. And ultimately, once you understand the basis of Christian theology, individualism is, like Cooper just said, individualism is satanic. And it is. That is in a technical sense, that's actually the spirit of Lucifer, is individualism. So okay, what was I going to say? That was it. Yeah.
I just saw a guy walking down the street. It looked like me, but like hotter and gayer even somehow. And it was so confusing. I'm not muted.
Steven, but hotter and gayer.
Even
no,
yeah.
No, you're not muted.
Oh yeah, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Marx says the family is the smallest form of collective. That's what it is. The family is the fundamental unit of society. The stripping things down below the family is, you've gone too far, because individuals don't act as individuals. At the very least, from the beginning, they act as representatives of their family. The child comes up and is a representative of his father's household. And when he leaves that household, he still bears the name of that household. He has his father's last name. This is why people take pride in their children, because a child is a representative of them. This is the natural, basic, smallest, fundamental unit of society. So there's no... The people who would challenge that are, if you contest that, then just consider that Mr. Long March to the Institutions himself, Antonio Gramsci, said that for the communist utopia to be realized, one of the most important institutions to be destroyed is the family. So your enemies see the family as one of your greatest assets. So why would you not make that one of your primary platforms? Just take the Long March to the Institutions and just do the opposite of everything that he said. Embrace the opposite of everything that he said, and you'll have the opposite of communism. And that won't be capitalism. Let me see what time it is here. Okay, yeah, I've got to go here.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. That line was, who cares what time it is? That was the line to end it on. 100%.
Well, we don't do clever endings here. It just doesn't happen.
Oh yeah.